we've taken the discussions thread, which we were working in, which was the Alice thread here, uh, 1369. And so this was the original, this used to be the improved data flow docs discussion, which you can see got migrated. Got migrated from an issue. I don't know where that information is now. Yeah, converted from issue, but the information's gone. But there is an issue where this used to live, for the even older version of this. So this started. We're going to improve the data flow docs, and on the way we realized, hey, okay, wait, the next step to everything is to build Alice. So uh, we did, a lot of trying to suss out the architecture. What is this thing? What does our mental model look like? And a lot of that work is captured within the thread here, and is not yet exported to what we've done for June. And what we've done for June is at the bottom of the thread. So here's the second party pull request. So this all started when we went and we said, okay, we need to split out the plugins, and to facilitate the second party setup, so you can have second and third party plugins. Um, and we arrived on this concept of the manifest, the plugins.json, and then eventually this is ballooned into, basically we're going to write this helper, who's going to be Alice, who's going to help us on each of the plugins in the ecosystem. So, and so this is what this PR now covers. So this covers a lot of different code, and then a lot of just the discussion stuff that was exported. So the pieces of this that are, of interest and to be contributed to. So please pull request the Alice branch, or please, comment directly in here. And so these are sort of the pieces of interest, and there's a lot of other code in there that I'm gonna clean up, that are some functionality related stuff that's just been sitting around in the same branch that need to get cleaned up. So then, okay, so what do we got? So yeah, so we have the tutorial itself, right? So this is where, we're going to map the existing work streams that we've identified here, as far as chapters that we've already started in flight. We're going to try to map this over the next 1 to 2 years. So, reach out, get involved if you want to propose a chapter, propose a tutorial, and then we'll figure out where we can fit it into the roadmap with other mentors and maintainers to work with you on that. Then uh, let's see. So yeah, so we can, just jump right into these. The preface is, I think, let's see. The preface is the one that kind of has a high level sketch of a few of the chapters that don't have content yet. So I would say let's add to the, either just add the chapters directly, or add right to the. You can either add in either place, right? We'll try to make sure that that it's deduplicated. So just make sure, you give us enough information that somebody can build off something, right? Or we'll evolve it. We just, all brainstorming is good right now, so we need to sort of flush this out. Okay, let's see. So the Architect Analysis Volume 0, this is the one where we're, figuring out what is the architecture, how do we implement the architecture, what are the base plugins, what is some of this general ecosystem stuff that we have to be aware of, and how do we work together to define the open architecture as our ecosystem grows, right? So, and primarily looking at things like Web5 and CI/CD frameworks and KCP to facilitate interaction for execution, and then formats like SBOM, the SPDX SBOM 3.0 spec, and the 2. Was it 2.3 spec, and all that good stuff in Vex. And then we're also looking at there's some work going on with CVE Bend tool, and they have this triage mechanism. So expanding that triage mechanism out into sort of this generic policy mechanism. And then there's some stuff in the thread about dynamic analysis and sort of this adaptive sandboxing. And so if we can all collaborate, to define a spec there, or to work towards a spec, and perhaps building on this next piece, which is the manifest ADR, to figure out what does that manifest look like for that policy. And then at that point, we can start, um, we'll start like we'll take the CVE bend tool existing triage mechanism and uh, we'll evolve that into this policy parser, and everybody can have their own and do different stuff off of it. But generally, we'll have this policy piece, which will say, hey, how do we accept CVEs? Like how do we deal with upgrades of CVEs? What ones just pass through if the tests pass? Like what's sort of our general pattern of like how do we deal with incoming events? If Alice is maintaining a repo, what's the policy around how she deals with incoming events, right? That's sort of how we can think of that. And then, of course, Alice is the fulfillment of the software supply chain on demand, right? In a context-aware fashion. So the SBOM stuff is going to be very critical in figuring out, what is the existing stuff that we need to fulfill in terms of delivery if that asset is requested. So let's see. Um, and we're looking, of course, so we're looking at analysis of existing artifacts, right, via things like CV Event Tool, and then we're also looking at definition of the plugins that we're creating and producing SBOMs for that stuff as well, right, and making that all the same thing, which is the open architecture. So your SBOM is basically your SBOM. You take your open architecture, you overlay your SBOM, you get a running application, right? So yeah. And then, here's shows some stuff that we're going to do where we're going to get into, threat modeling and debug and really build this entity Alice off of this Coach Alice first set of tutorials as the base, where we really get deep into how do we be software developers, right? And what is the thought process that we go through and model that thought process in Alice's code and in her overlays. So then we'll get more into, so Alice and the art of strategy. This is going to be more into the visualizations and how we sort of see the world in the same way. How do we get to this place where we're all looking at the same picture, including Alice, right? And so how do we explore visualizations and, just methods of interaction and communication so that we can basically viewing art as a mode of communication and as a mode of learning, right? When we're looking at sort of the machine sense or successful communication as being learning. And we're going to sort of, just get into, how do we use art to learn? And then we'll flip that in volume 3 and say, well, how do you use art, for nefarious purposes, right? And how do you paint a certain picture with the data that you're distributing on the network, or perhaps the entities who you reward to compute specific data, which then goes onto the network, right, to sort of corrupt these oracles in your hybrid on-chain, off-chain contract situations. And so that is, that this is, Alice and the art of strategy, or, on mind control. And we'll focus on, effective strategies for controlling one's own mind, and then through creating this network of agents and detection of the network of agents of who controls one's own mind, we can develop we'll develop adaptive policies to modify our threat model to these more strategic threats that we faced in this hostile open network environment. So in volume 4, then we're going to go into, okay, so now all right, so what have we got here at this point? We've got our plans, volume 0. This is what we're running. This is like our running thing where we sort of just keep going, keep adding more stuff. If it's high level architecture stuff. So it's sort of a volume, sort of not. And then it's sort of a set of tutorials. It's sort of just like our context around the whole thing viewed as almost like an ADR and implementation. So when we move, so this is how we've built her, architecting Alice. Coach Alice, this is Alice, the overlays of the software engineer, the software architect. And then Alice and the art of strategy, the communication overlays, Alice and the strategy of art, these what become effectively our security in this new environment, in this new threat landscape. And then once we have that, now we're like, okay, so we've got our functionality, Coach Alice. We've got our communication with the outside world, Volume 2, Alice and the Art of Strategy. How does she produce art? How does she interpret art? How do we interact with her in that way? Volume 3, then we have Alice and the Strategy of Art. So she's seeing these communications as she's interacting with the outside world. She knows how to do her job, and she knows how to sort of like respond and adapt in this dynamic way, which is pursuant to her which is always in pursuit of her strategic principles. She wakes up every day at the tick, and she, does her best to align her activities to those strategic principles between the tick and the talk, and then she resets because she's ephemeral, and she goes again, right? So for each job. So in this volume, Alice and the Health of the Ecosystem, Alice will be out there and she will be contributing to open source projects, right? And so she will be building up our open source projects because we don't want to let her out on the whole, wide world yet. So this is our DFFML ecosystem, and of course anybody else who wants to participate in our little tutorial here. So in that case, we're basically just going to monitor. I don't know. We need to flesh this one out more. But this is basically like, hey, this is right before number 5, which is then, okay, now Alice, here you go. You're going out into the world. We think you're almost there. Then at that point, this is pretty far out, right? This is probably like, we're looking at like, these are probably a year each, right? So we're probably looking 5 years out now. So I don't know. This would, feel free to propose stuff. And this is, what does she look like in the real world? What kind of stuff do we have to deal with there? We want to make sure to get anything and everything. This is, ethical considerations. We're thinking about like we're teaching a real human, right? Don't think of her as a machine. Think of her as a human. Like how do you be a software engineer, a software architect in the world, right? And then how do we, debug your mind like a machine and then make you rolling, which is volume 6, right? And then we basically go in and we say, okay, you've been out in the world for a year now. How do we fine tune you, right? So volume 5 is more of like, okay, like, hey, this is a different environment. It's not a sandbox anymore, right? Our ecosystem is our sandbox. Volume 5 is okay, no more sandbox. And then volume 6 is okay, let's we were in firefighting mode for a year, let's assume. This is how these things go. And so then we come in volume 6 and we start to say, okay, now we recognize, okay, we've taken care of the firefighting mode stuff. Now let's fine tune. And then finally, once we've fine tuned, then she'll be rolling. And we'll all be rolling through whatever the other side of this is, and she'll tell us what that is. So so please pull request and review the Alice branch, and please feel free to comment in the PR or reach out directly. But yeah, so this is where we're at for June, basically. So what to expect? Well, we'll be marching towards RFC v2, probably sometime around the end of December. Would like to see, the rest of the ADRs that are involved in this. Let's see. So the system context. Would like to see the rest of Coach Alice and probably some of Alice and the Art of Strategy get fleshed out, just so that we know what our next 1 to 2 years looks like. And then at that point, and there's a Gantt chart. If you feel like updating the Gantt chart with any of your plans, you can just update it directly. Just make sure that you update both, and then it'll already be on the Gantt chart. So great. I think that's where we're at. So the CI does not work right now. So the demo code that we've been working on, that does work. So if you want to work on Alice, then it works, right? But the next thing that I'll be doing is I'll be trying to get the overlay stuff working, and then the first tutorial for the overlay, so we can get people writing overlays. So yeah, great. All right. Well, thanks everyone.